So, continuing with our UFC 200 breakdown series, we're going to take a closer look into Brock Lesnar's game. So we all know he's a strong wrestler, but we're going to look at a few techniques that make his ground game so effective. So once Brock gets his opponent on the ground, rather than look for submissions, he instead tries to trap his opponents in uncomfortable situations and land hard strikes. So we're going to examine two techniques he used in the Frank Mir fight at UFC 100. So the technique Brock used in the first round was from half guard, and he used it to dominate Frank in that first round. So Brock ended up in half guard and ended up trapping Frank and hurting him with strikes. So from half guard, Brock came through with his crossface and drove this arm up. He used his strength to drive this arm up, came underneath the armpit and turned his shoulder. So he turned his shoulder into Frank's face, effectively locking his spine into place. From here, he worked the body and worked the head, effectively trapping Frank into the place and hurting him with strikes.
So now watch this exact technique being executed. We can see Brock controlling his head and turning his face towards the punches. So he's got his lower half locked as well, and he's got him stuck in this position, turning him into his strikes. This position served two purposes for Brock in this fight. Firstly, allowed him to dominate the round. He had Frank stuck here for a few minutes and allowed him to work his ground and pound, and it also nullified any of Frank Mir's jiu-jitsu.
So the technique Brock used in the second round to finish the fight was again in half guard, but this time against the cage. So he had Frank against the cage. Frank tried to get to his feet. Brock caught this hand on the way up and pulled it down, passing it through to his opposite hand. From here, he extended and drove Frank down into the mat. From this position, I'm free to strike and currently has one arm to defend his face. I can come around, forcing his guard to come up and protect his temple. Once he does that, I can punch underneath to his chin. As he defends that, I can come over the top again. So effectively, I'm giving him one arm to defend two positions. Brock then came over the top and underneath, finishing the fight.
So as we examine the second technique, we can see Frank stuck against the cage, tries to get to his feet. We can see Brock control his hand and pass it through to his other hand behind his back. Now that he has Frank stuck in this position, leaving him with only one hand to defend his face, he can punch up underneath his armpit and connect these punches on the chin.
So these are just two examples of how Brock Lesnar utilizes his top-heavy game to finish his opponents with ground and pound. Next week, we're going to break down and compare Mark Hunt and Brock Lesnar and make our predictions for the fight.